The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Welcome to An Open Door on the Arts. My name is Barb Richer, and I am your host while we travel around the Capital Region, distantly and near up, and meet the wonderful artists and visit the wonderful venues that enrich our lives and our Capital Region. I have a very special guest with me today from a very special place. I feel like most of you, or many of you, will certainly know of this place. So I'm not introducing a new venue to you, but it's a venue that has kept inventing itself and inventing itself and inventing itself, while at the same time staying very true to the roots that made it a very special, very wonderful place to begin with. Today, Margie Rosenkranz is our very special guest. She is the manager. She has many things. She does many things with this program and has for many years. She is the director. She is does the booking. She does the management. She looks at the web. She handles some of the publicity. She's a one-woman show, and she's amazing and breathes life into this venue every day. So, Margie, welcome.
Thank you. Very kind words, but I do have 70 volunteers now.
Yes, yeah. Well, there is that. No, I know, but it always helps when there's one person at least kind of figuring out who's on first and who needs to go to second.
Yes.
And I know you've been with the Eighth Step Coffee House, which we don't use the word coffee house anymore, Margie has informed me, but that's how it started, and that's what I think you might remember it as, and I remember it as the Eighth Step Coffee House. Margie's going to share some of the history of that wonderful, wonderful place and tell us what happened to it when it grew up completely and stopped using the word coffee house and just became Eighth Step.
Grew up is an interesting way to put it. Well, first of all, I must say a little disclaimer. I was not there in 1967 when it opened, but I came in 1985, and by 1987 I was the manager and director, and we were on Willett Street, 14 Willett Street in Albany. We were a project of Focus Churches in Albany initially.
Okay, that was back in 67?
That's correct, and it was a ministry. And it was a youth project that was invented by Focus Churches, which is a coalition of 4 beautiful historic churches in that Center Square area around Lark Street in Albany. And they wanted something that was going to be an outreach program that would give something to do on weekend nights and night. Actually, it was open all the time during the era of Vietnam and the civil rights struggle.
When you said 67, I realized that there was so much going on, and youth was so much involved in all of those feelings and discoveries, and the craziness that was our country at that time.
Yes, and at that time, Lark Street was a student ghetto, and there was a lot of unrest there, and the university, of course, is not very far away.
Of course.
Nor all the other colleges in this region. We're loaded with colleges here.
Yes, we are.
And they wanted a place for, it was a street ministry. It was not for the Presbyterian kids. It was for everybody. And they gave over, First Presbyterian, which is right along the Washington Park there.
Right.
Gave over its basement space, and they put a stage in there, and they built a kitchen, and they built a little room with the lighting in there. And they hired a manager. Actually, they hadn't hired the manager. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. They had a board of approximately 30 people. It was quite unwieldy. And they nonetheless managed to put this project together. And it was meant to stimulate dialogue among kids,
students,
meaning high school through college,
right,
and those who were not in either. And It was funded by Focus Churches for 20 years. That was its mandate.
Amazing.
20-year ministry is what they called it.
Did it stay in that location for 20 years?
For 30 years.
Oh, it did?
We were there for 30 years. And when I came in 85, it was getting toward the tail end of the funding.
Okay.
So 87 was the last year we had funds. So I was there. I kind of presided over the transition there to becoming more self-sufficient.
And tell us what kinds of things went on during that 20 years.
Well, initially they did a lot of open mic nights and poetry nights, and they had films, and they had discussions, and they had lectures and potlucks.
So it really was a forum for young people to talk about the things that were unsettling in the world and in their life, perhaps, or even the things that they drew inspiration from, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And I think that this region is quite rich as a result of this political involvement, I would say. It was kind of a, I don't want to say think tank, but I can't think of the word really, but it was a place where things sprang up out of the discussions and so on.
Like a wellspring.
Yes, that's a good word. And Project Equinox started there, and their Thanksgiving dinner is still happening at the church there.
Oh, yes.
And it's one of the oldest in the country. Yeah. And it's huge. It's just huge. And we were the dessert portion of the Equinox dinner every Thanksgiving. We would shut down the coffee house, and we would allow them to bring the pies and the cakes and so on into the kitchen, and people would come down the back stairway and have dessert at the 8th step, and then go out onto the street and go home.
Oh, how nice!
Yeah, nice! And they were just loaded with volunteers. It was quite a massive undertaking, and we had performances in the evenings and on the weekends. Mostly, I would say that the contemporary singer-songwriter movement was kind of in its childhood in those days. So it was not a finished product, so to speak. It was not a formal performance. There was one formal performance upstairs in the church by the time I got there. But there were lots and lots of small ones where your audience would be anywhere from, in my experience, 5 to 150 down there.
And that would be what typically back then we were calling the coffee house.
Right.
Okay.
And it was indeed a coffee house. It had tables, wooden tables. I still have a couple of them, and chairs, and they would serve. They had a staff of waiters and waitresses, and they would deliberately engage people in conversation and try and just not with any particular end in mind, but just trying to get a dialogue going, which I think was the genius part of the plan.
Keeping the dialogue moving during all the times that we were struggling with one thing after another that was the 60s and the 70s, and maybe is life. I mean, maybe that's why it's still there.
Maybe
you
so.
never stop needing a place to keep that dialogue going.
But there was a backdrop of violence with the Vietnam War, etc. And I think that was a really important component, both of the start of the step and also of the way that it played out, the way that it evolved.
I read somewhere that Jane Fonda actually came there, and the 8th step hosted her when a lot of other places would not have anything to do with her.
Yeah, she was scheduled to speak at a church in Albany, a liberal church, obviously. And it was the era of Hanoi Jane, when she had posed on a nose cone over in Vietnam. And, the public came down very hard on her for that. As she says, rightly so. That's what she says now. Right. And she went to Emma Willard, so she knew Albany, and she was in town.
I didn't know that.
And she was supposed to go to this potluck / discussion at this church, and the congregation was not happy with this, so that they protested and canceled the event. So we hastily And again, I was not there for this.
Invited her.
Invited her, and we had a potluck, and she came down, and she brought Tom Hayden.
Oh,
And they had the few people I've met who were there just said it was an amazing night. And they actually came back again another time.
That's wonderful.
Later on.
That's wonderful.
Which was the whole purpose of the project, was to take the heat of the emotion around a lot of these issues and turn it into something more constructive.
Right, right.
Let's learn to think.
Yes, wonderful. So wonderful, and at a time when it was so very much needed.
It was.
You also had an equally serious but somewhat lighter presentation. You were very, very involved with Clearwater, I believe.
Yes, I wouldn't call it lighter so much as different, but
You're right.
The Hudson River, and I worked for Clearwater. I booked the festival for about 3 years and did publicity for them several years, and have been quite entwined with them. I sang with the Sloop Singers, and Clearwater and the 8-Step were of a set for many, many, many years. And they used to have a wonderful event called Pumpkin Sale, Clearwater's Pumpkin Sale, and every October they would bring the Sloop Clearwater, Pete Seeger's. It's a reproduction of an 18th century sloop, and these sloops dotted the Hudson, and they connected the city to the upstate ports for passengers and for cargo. And he wanted a symbol of his vision of a cleaner Hudson. So he, with a whole group of other people, including Bill Spence of Old Songs, by the way, one of our cousins.
In that?
Yes, and he's the one who brought contra dance to the 8-Step. So the 8-Step introduced contra dance. But back to Clearwater, the Clearwater was built in Maine and sailed down the coast through the New York Harbor and back up to its new home on the Hudson. And they had a certain format. They would sail during the day, and in the afternoon they would stop at a port, and they would trawl the Hudson, and they would pull out to make their point. The dreadful stuff that was floating in there. It was nothing more than a floating sewer in those days, and just all the detritus, and
they would haul it up.
They would haul it up, and they would make a collage on a screen, and then they would put it on shore. They'd have a little festival on shore, and there would always be music because the crew was musical. Don McLean was on that trip, and Len Chandler, who was part of the Civil Rights. He was a SNCC member during the Student Nonviolent Committee during the Civil Rights era, and Gordon Bach, who was probably the only real sailor on board. There were 2 real sailors, and he was one of them. And they did these dockside festivals and then an evening concert to pay their way all the way up to Poughkeepsie, which is where they.
So it was powerful education.
Oh yes,
powerful education. I would imagine, with being able to see what was in the river that they were floating on, and.
I saw a photo of it. I saw many photos because of the publicity I did, and really, Barbara, it looked like an oil slick. It was that dense.
Oh my gosh!
And you wouldn't even think of swimming in there.
Oh my gosh!
And now you can swim in the Hudson again.
Yep.
They have a river pool down river, and they block off a part, and it's actually approved by Clearwater, etc.
So 8-Step and Clearwater were very much connected for many years.
We were. And they replicated that initial trip, that maiden voyage, by sailing from Albany. They sailed up to Albany. We had a kickoff concert for them and a dockside concert. And then they would visit 13 ports on the way down to South Street Seaport in the city.
Wow.
And they would have these dockside festivals with kids coming from schools.
What a huge educational tool. That's amazing.
And it's a wonderful boat. It's a wonderful, wonderful organization, and they're still running too.
Is 8-Step connected at all with Clearwater at this point?
At this point, yes, because when we do a potluck, a group of my old friends from Clearwater always come up and lead the music, and we have a potluck and a song circle, which is an art all by itself.
At the At the
At the
current
step,
at the current
at the
okay,
proctors.
at the step. Yeah, we're going to get to that. A big step for the step was coming up in the future. So we have you here on Willett Street, involved with really the most incredibly important movements of the 60s, 70s, and right on through for many, many years. But after 20, you left your residence on Willett Street.
Actually, after 30.
Oh, you were there 30
years. We were there
years.
30 years, and we had been invited to stay forever, but there was a new administration, and they didn't really totally understand who we were, and they thought they were just supporting a venue. And that's something we didn't understand until later.
Not a movement, not a feeling, not.
No, it wasn't. We were still carrying out the original kind of mandate for that ministry, really. And there weren't any of us from the church. None of us were members. That was probably another point. But they housed us for a good long time. That was First Presbyterian. And it just had some wonderful people there, just wonderful people. And our mentor there was a Reverend Robert Lamar, who was, I've found, known around the country, actually, as being a visionary and caring about the greater culture. And he's still here in Albany, actually.
That's an incredibly long partnership. So there must have been wonderful people on both sides to keep that partnership going.
I think so. It was, and when we came to Proctor's, I'll tell you this little story. We were opening our first show. We had Sheila Jordan, the jazz singer, opening in the GE Theater, which is kind of across the hall, in the new part of Proctor's, across from the main stage. And Bob Lamar came walking across the lobby.
How wonderful.
And I said, "I'm so happy to see you," and he gave me a hug. And I said, "I'm so happy you came." And he said, "Well, I must confess, I have tickets to the musical across the hall."
I'm just
I said, "Well,
stopping in.
I'll forgive you."
That's wonderful. Well, when you're connected with something that makes such steady and profound inroads in people and in issues for so many years, you don't give that up easily. So I'm sure that he would come to wherever you were and be welcomed and feel part of it, for sure.
He was a really unique person, and he is a unique. I mean, in the context of the 8th Step, he was unique because he gave us the mentoring and the help that we needed, and.
All the way through, it sounds like.
All the way through. I remember coming out. Am I getting off time here?
No,
Okay.
no, we're doing okay. I know there's so many traditions, but we've mentioned quite a number of them already, but I just wanted to mention a couple of others, but we're getting there.
Okay. Well, to give you a kind of a picture of what it was like, there were New York State had cut funding for the psychiatric center over in Albany, and they let their patients out during the day after that. And a lot of them would look around for somewhere to be, and the 8th Step was open all the time, so they would tend to cluster in the park and around that area. And Bob Lamar said, "Now, if you have any doubts about this, if anyone approaches and you think you need any help, you just come up to the office and get me. Don't try to handle this yourself." So one day I came in and there was someone sleeping with a shopping cart next to him, and he was obviously homeless. And my first inclination would be to be kind, but you have to be careful. You do have to be careful. And I went up, and Reverend Lamar was about to conduct a funeral in the church upstairs, and so he was decked in his cassock and surplice, the whole colorful, beautiful white satin and green, and he's very tall. He's well over 6 feet, and I backed away from the office because I saw this, and he turned around and he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "There's someone sleeping," and he said, "I'll be right back," and he went out with me. And he stood over this poor fellow and shook him and said, "Time to get up, son." And he woke up and he saw this vision.
Oh my goodness, it would be like a vision, like a spirit come to visit.
In white satin and white and green satin. It was just quite a comical moment, and he couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Oh my God. gosh.
But yeah, we were the political venue, and we still are really the political venue in Albany. And for me, that was really a wonderfully luscious opportunity, because I could create workshops and I could create shows that were openly political and openly...
Because that was the purpose.
Yeah, and the rule of thumb was we don't proselytize, we don't try to persuade people, we present issues, and they are based in progressive values. In other words, taking care of one another, and values espoused by focused churches, which is the foundation of what they do for the public, and they've done quite a bit for the public. That's a whole other story.
And while all of that was going on, you were also presenting the music, entertainment, the musical way of sharing these values, and bringing in wonderful people who could get that word out in a musical presentation.
Yeah.
So you had some amazingly
kind of synergistic in many cases, but we don't do political music as a rule. We do the music, and a lot. I think, particularly since the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that folk and acoustic music has
blended,
increasingly become a medium to communicate.
Yes. I think that's what I was trying to say.
Social justice, yeah. And, because we certainly, I'd say the bulk of our performances are not openly political. Right.
But so many of them do espouse a very reasonable understanding of one another in that entertainment. It's not necessarily... It's music that seems to me to draw people together.
Yes, but not didactic. I mean, we don't.
Right,
exactly. There's a line there that we just don't want to cross. Right. And it's not to say we won't present someone who is pretty hard-hitting, but we'll usually put a disclaimer in there, so it doesn't. We're not trying to draw people in there who don't want to hear about something.
Right.
But mostly it's straight-ahead music. It's blues, and it's folk, and it's the music itself that came. This is not the community dedicated to politics. This is a community dedicated to music. Right. And we have about 40 really active volunteers. And then we have another cadre of volunteers that have, they come in for certain things. And I think that substantially we are very much like we were way back in the beginning. In the basement.
You've stayed very, very true to your initial concept.
Yeah.
And the music has too, but the entertainment has grown, I think, too.
It has.
Even more.
It has.
And that brought you... I know there was a period after you left the churches where you kind of wandered a bit from place to place, finding another home, but then a very interesting and large opportunity came.
Yes. We were actively looking for a home, and we were for a time over at Coho's Music Hall, which was a wonderful experience, and they were very good to us as well. We had this beautiful 500-seat hall.
It's a lovely, lovely spot.
Really was, with its own ghost, and we had fun with that. We did have fun over there, and we were doing very well. But there was the 9/11 happened, actually, and there was a fellow from New York who had grown up in Coho's, and he did musicals, and he came back and started doing musicals in the hall. So we packed up and moved on. And we have presented in Page Hall, in down at the Ed Building, in that theater down there. We've been over at Cafe Lena. Cafe Lena is a close cousin of ours, of course. Lena Spencer. I worked with her at Cafe Lena before was
Coming to
what it is
Aidston,
now.
yeah.
When it was still Lena's. And sorry, I just lost the thread.
So you were traveling, looking
were
for a
traveling.
place. You did some things with Cafe Lena, and then
We did one thing at Cafe Lena. We
Okay.
did some things at SCC at the community college. We actually did something in Proctor's in what would become our space later, which is just
Oh, wow.
very interesting. That whole second arcade there was the old Carl Company,
okay.
Shades of My Childhood.
Yes,
And
okay.
we went in there and had a show in this bare room. And one of their sound techs came in and helped out, and what's not to love, you know?
Very
It's
nice.
Really,
Yeah, very nice.
Really wonderful. He's still there. And we did a couple of shows there. And
I'm going to move you along because we only have about 5, if we press, a little more than 5 minutes.
Okay.
But you eventually did make what maybe is a permanent. This is your 9th season in Proctor's, and you have 2 places that you can perform there.
we have 4,
Oh,
actually.
wow.
We use all of their spaces.
Okay.
We use the what they call their educational center. We call our underground, which is where we do our smaller concerts, up to about 100, 150, and our storeroom is down there. And it's very much like the old 8-step, the crew says.
The feeling is.
Posts and everything. And it's really a fun, intimate space. And
I visited that space, and it is a really fun space
Yep.
to get to.
And we have a wonderful sound engineer who used to be the audiovisual director for the New York State Museum.
Oh, nice.
And he's us. He's just wonderful. He can work anywhere, and has his own sound company, as a matter of fact. But he does sound in the GE Theater. We're the only company there that's allowed to do our own sound, and we present mostly in the underground in the GE Theater, which is 400 seats.
Okay.
So we'll do John Gorka and people like that.
And the underground is about how many?
That's up to about 125.
Right.
So
it's much more
usually
intimate. You go from 125 to maybe 400.
Right.
Right. Back and forth.
And we have done so far one show on the main stage. We did Pete Seeger's last really big show. He did a couple more later, but they weren't as big. They weren't as big as this one.
As this one was.
This was a sellout at 2,600 seats. With
Oh my God! How wonderful.
His sister Peggy, and he did a show, and it was
Amazing.
It
Very, very
was a
special.
career marker. Let me put it that way.
Tell us some of the folks that you have coming in this season.
We're starting our season with David Roth on the 26th, as a matter of fact. Wonderful singer-songwriter who has worked with the Chicken Soup for the Soul books.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
just a very vibrant voice and great spirit, and writes his own material. And we have a really special show on the 4th of October called Rise Again. Our community is very much about participatory singing and playing. That's a hallmark of the Capital Region folk community.
Yes, it is.
And the Singer's Bible, as we affectionately call it, was something that was supported by Pete Seeger in his early days, and it's a book called Rise Up Singing, and it has a lot of chords and lyrics in it, of songs that everybody likes to sing a lot. And there's a sequel coming out that Pete was very enthused about before he died, and it was done by the editor is Peter Blood, and he and his wife Annie Patterson have put together another one, and Pete wrote the foreword, and the sequel is coming out. We're doing the book release.
How
Very
wonderful.
much a sing-along. And
I was just going to say, is it a sing-along? Absolutely.
Yep, and the folk community, the folk acoustic community is so in support of this that we have some wonderful performers lined up, like John McCutcheon from down south, and Kim and Reggie Harris, who live in Middleburg, and do a lot of Underground Railroad and spirituals and beautiful, beautiful original work. I mean,
How nice.
and Pat Humphreys and Sandy Opatow, who are very much social justice oriented. So these are people whose songs you'll find in the book, and they're coming to help introduce.
To celebrate them with
celebrate,
you. To celebrate
yes.
them with you and for Pete and with Pete,
Yep.
wherever he may be, and
Yep.
his spirit lives on, and that's
Absolutely.
wonderful.
And Pete wrote the introduction, as did Billy Bragg. He wrote one as well. And then we've got a straight-ahead blues player, fabulous blues guitarist and singer named Jack Williams. And Mulebone is a duo. Also
I love that
blues.
name, Mulebone. I love that name.
They're really unusual. They're straight ahead blues, but they're also based in straight ahead blues. But John Ragusa actually plays the conch on stage, and he
Conch
plays
is a
flute.
beautiful sound.
It's
Very amazing
haunting.
sound. Yes.
Really beautiful. And so that's John Ragusa and Hugh Poole. And then we have a trio. It's 3-part male harmony called Brother Son, who have just taken the folk scene by storm. They're
Really?
just really give you goosebumps to listen to them. They're wonderful.
How nice.
And Joe Crookston, who's from Ithaca, he's very much a national, not to type him as just being from Ithaca, he's not at all. He's a national touring artist who is a singer-songwriter.
So we can come there and hear what traditionally to some of us is folk music, folk,
Very much.
and but blues, which I adore, blues and jazz. You mentioned a jazz singer the other day too. So it's such a range, but pulls together people of like-minded sharing and celebration. So it's just a wonderful. It seems like it has kept its spirit from all those many years ago, right all the way through till now.
I certainly hope so, because we did a lot of discussing of this before we moved into Proctor's. And
That must have been a very big move. We're a little bit short of time, but I'd just like to take a couple seconds here. It seems unlikely, you know, when you think of
unlikely
8th
partnership.
Step Coffee House, which you don't use anymore, but 8th Step, and then Proctor's, very large, entertainment thing, but your spaces there, having been privileged to come and tour them with you, are so welcoming and so comfortable, physically comfortable, but also comfortable in a sense that it is the feeling of 8th Step. It is the feeling of 8th Step. So people that
Thank you.
familiar with it from a long time ago aren't walking into a I love Proctor's, but we're not walking into a stagey, big, beautiful in its own right place. We can feel as though we're walking into a place that is comfortable for the music that we've
Intimate
loved
is-
for so long, that's intimate and allows a sharing of ideas and a sharing of feelings. So it really has captured, and I think part of that it might be due to you. You've been at the helm for so long, and you know what that feeling is, and you know what those values are, and I think they continue to shine in everything that I saw there and in the programming that you do. So I think it's
well, thank you. That's
one of a
high
kind
compliment.
still. One of a kind still. After all this time, it's still one of a kind doing what it needs to do.
You know what, Barbara? I think it's a bit like parenting. You see what you've got, and you try to stand out of the way and not ruin it.
Yes. Yes.
Make sure it has the opportunity it needs.
Yes. But at the same time, you want to keep your arms somewhere in the distance just in case there's a fall that you're not aware of.
Yes, indeed.
Well, I think it's been caught several times. It seems like it's been caught, and it's thriving and alive and healthy. It's a gem for our area, for sure. We don't have to go far to hang on to some of our best thought out, best planned
We're lucky.
venues. Yeah, we are lucky. So we've moved from Albany to Schenectady to a very wonderful place, but it's still the 8th Step.
It is. It is. And for me, it's been a great pleasure. My granddad was a musician in Schenectady, actually. He was a guitarist with the symphony over there.
Oh, how grand.
And sang folk music to us at night. So what goes around
Comes around.
comes around.
Well, stay by that door, because you're a wonderful greeter, Margie.
Thank you.
You keep the spirit alive. So I look forward to seeing all of you at this most wonderful, wonderful place, 8th Step. We don't even say coffee house. It's the 8th Step at Proctor's, but it's still the same place. I'll see you there. Thank you.